Hello, everybody, and happy Wednesday to you. Thanks for joining us for the Canary Q&A session today. We're going to give it a minute to let people join in. And while I'm doing that, just in the chat, if you want to let us know where you're hailing from. I'm actually in Chicago, where it's been snowing, which has been great in getting me into the flow of things on a few projects to get today, but let us know where you're coming from in the chat. All righty, see a couple coming in from Cleveland, Colorado State University, Columbus. Welcome. We're so glad to see you. Oh, I see some people are under a tornado watch in Delaware, so thank you for joining us nonetheless. And also LA, nice and sunny. I'm sure it's a lot warmer over there. But yeah, welcome everybody. We're going to give it just a few more seconds and then we're going to move on into the actual program. But we are so excited to be featuring Canary on Kanopy, especially as our thoughts have been on climate change, climate history, and we are going into, well, we are in going in Earth Month, going into Earth Day observations very soon. So we are so excited to have Canary here on Kanopy. We hope that you've had a chance to take a look at the documentary, really ingest it, because we've got a great discussion planned today. And with that, I'm actually going to go forward and introduce our speakers. So first off, we have, of course, we're so honored to have Dr. Lonnie Thompson. He's a paleoclimatologist and a university professor in the School of Earth Sciences at Ohio State University, and he's the main subject of the documentary, of course. We also have Danny O'Malley, who co-directed the film. He's a Grammy and James Beard nominated film director, and Canary is his debut feature. He's also known for his work on Netflix Chef's Table, where he serves as co-executive producer and a director. We also have Alex Rivest, who is also co-director and Canary filmmaker, and the co-director of Canary, of course. He has a PhD in neuroscience from MIT and studied the brain circuits underlying episodic memory formation. And last but not least, we do have Eve Beatty, our moderator for the session. She is a natural at bringing in conversations. She's also a beat reporter for Vanity Fair, SFist, and SF Chronicle. So welcome everybody. And I guess, last but not least, I'm Josh Garcia. I'm the marketing manager here at Kanopy, and we are so happy to have you aboard. Moving forward, I did want to bring to everybody's attention, in case this is your first time joining us, this is part of the Kanopy Cinema Series. We do have monthly and periodic highlights of films. And for this spring, this is our third one out of 4. So we have 2 more remaining, one today for April, which is Canary, of course. You can watch it now on Kanopy if you haven't had a chance to watch it. And of course, the Q&As today. Then next month, we have in May, we have Finding the Money. So we're featuring Dr. Stephanie Kelton, who is known for her theories of her very specific vocal theories of modern monetary theory. You'll be able to start watching that on Kanopy on May 6th. And we're also going to have a Q&A with her and the co-director and the director of the film as well on May 8th. And then that's not all. This is just spring, but we do have a large and pretty impactful lineup coming for fall. So be on the lookout for that. We'll be announcing that in June. And then lastly, I did want to also mention, if you do want to know a little bit more about the Kanopy Cinema Series that we have, you can go to lib.kanopy.com/cinema series to learn more about this event, of course, and register for future events. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to Eve Beatty, who's going to be moderating our session.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for setting us up so well. And thanks for the reminder that this is Earth Month. It's good to know that if we don't solve the climate crisis during this conversation today, we have a couple more weeks to really get things done. So yeah, I'm stoked about that. I want to dive in by asking Alex. Alex, I was surprised after I watched the movie because I didn't do any research beforehand because I'm very lazy. I had no idea that this was your first film and that you are actually sort of a dyed-in-the-wool academic. Can you tell us all how you made the decision to and how you moved from being an academic to a big Hollywood guy?
Well, first of all, thanks for the question, and thanks for hosting us here for this Q&A and for helping get Canary out to the world. We think the messages in Canary are important, and the larger the audience is, we think we can actually make a difference on climate change. So thank you. So I did my PhD in neuroscience. I spent 15 years studying mouse memory systems and trying to understand how the brain works. And I kept having this itch where I'd watch science programming and it always felt like homework to me. And so when I met, and I always wanted to do something about it, I would travel to the ends of the earth and I'd, be reporting back and taking videos of lava in the Congo, but there was always lights a little further than I can go. And I realized that those people were always scientists. And there was this thing stuck in my head that, curiosity can enable exploration. And I didn't feel like that was being taught. And it's the thing that can inspire any kid is the idea that their questions can allow them to explore the planet. I met Danny over Shabu Shabu in Little Tokyo. He was working on Chef's Table, and I said, I want to show that curiosity can enable exploration. And he said, that's great. I also feel like science programming feels like homework, but there's no story there. You need to find the stories. You need to care about the person. What they need, you need to understand why they're in that place and what it means to them. And so Danny and I started off on this mission. We got a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to prove that scientists were interesting. And as part of that process, we came across Lonnie. And, we had a Skype call with Lonnie, and I very clearly remember the first minute of our conversation. Danny and I were just pulled into this adventure story. Within 40 minutes, Danny and I were both crying. And then at the end, when we turned off the Skype, I turned to Danny and I said, if there's one story we ever tell, it has to be this one. For me, it's when I looked at my science career, I asked myself, if I didn't do this, would someone else do it? And the answer was yes. So I had to look in the mirror and decide, how can I help the world engage better with science? How can I use my skill set to help do something different and novel? And that's how I ended up here. And I've just been so humbled and honored that Lonnie has worked with us so closely and allowed us to see that this is not just a vision of tackling climate change and telling a good story. It is about trying to reinvent the way that scientists are seen on the big screen, try to inspire the next generation to realize that, science is amazing and it is about tackling the impossible. And it is a place where the impossible can become possible. And so, Lonnie's on that journey with us to try to change the way scientists are seen too. And we couldn't have come across a better partner in doing that.
Well, thanks for bringing up how you met Danny. You ruined my next question, so that's cool. But it's also cool because I have a backup, which is that one of the things I wanted to ask you, Danny, is how you transfer sort of the skill set from stuff like Chef's Table, from the other stuff that you've worked on in the past, to Alex's sort of goals of, I guess, sort of making science, packaging science as a Marvel movie. So how do you, Danny, take what you learned doing this one thing and applying it to this screen?
Yeah, I would say basically I treat the target the same no matter the subject matter, because people are the same, behavior's the same. If you work in an industry, you're writing a lot of emails. If you everyone's got a boss they don't like, everyone's got a dream that they're trying to achieve, they have obstacles. So to me, I think a lot of Hollywood looks at things in the boxes of, this is science, this is food, these things are fundamentally different. And one of the ways we work on Chef's Table is we look at this, and we don't say this is a food show. We say this is an adventure story. And when they go to the unknown, they're going to a kitchen in France. So in a way, this is closer to the classic hero story that we always hear, where Lonnie had this dream and this vision of something that he couldn't see, and he had to go into the wilderness to find it. So the way I see it is that science is actually closer to the adventure stories of Marvel and Steven Spielberg movies and all those things that we've been seeing. It's just people's biases against science because they don't connect with it is that there's no human aspect to connect with. And to me, that just makes science the perfect place to go tell stories, because you're not competing with anybody. You're just picking the best stories possible, because everyone else is kind of like, that's not entertaining.
So you're applying sort of the Joseph Campbell model as opposed to the whiteboard model.
Yeah, essentially, I don't like Joseph Campbell. He gets too rigid sometimes of like, this is this phase, this is this phase, but
But
like,
you said hero's journey. Come on.
yeah, in general, like, what are stories for? And if you look back when we were in smaller communities, there'd be stuff out on the horizon, and we wouldn't know what happens out there. And people would leave, they'd face challenges, they'd encounter unfamiliar people, they'd get help, they'd get hurt, and then they'd come back and tell you what they learned from that adventure. And that's pretty much how we structure ideas in our head and stories, and it's the way we remember things best. And that's why all movies kind of gravitate towards that form. And so to me, science is just so close to the actual heart of the matter of what stories are for. It's about survival, it's about facing the unknown, and it's about growing not just you as the character, but how your growth, you can bring something back and teach the world what you've learned so they don't have to go through the same struggles that you do.
Well, let's turn to your character, your Tony Stark, if you will. Lonnie, I want to ask you about a theme that I picked up that maybe I'm wrong with, but I sort of got the feeling that you have always felt like or been a little bit of an outsider, that you were this academically motivated grade schooler in a place where that wasn't as much of a priority, that you were sort of shut out by the Arctic cool kids. Do you feel like, I guess first, do you feel like you were an outsider? And if you agree with that, then do you feel like being sort of outside those parameters helped your career or harmed it?
Well, I think it made my career. And I tell my students that, sometimes your best friends are your enemies, because they force you to think in a different way, and that opens new doors. And so I'm a firm believer that if you have an enemy, you should try to make them a friend, because everything goes better if you're collaborating and on the same page. But in those early days, yeah, there wasn't any real possibility for getting into the polar regions. They had their plan, and yeah, I wasn't part of it.
I mean, it almost sounded like there was like the cool kids table in the cafeteria, and you had to go make your own table with your own group of kids.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting time. I mean, exciting, because the cores were all new. It's all new information coming out, and actually, one of the people in the film, Willie Dansgaard, I mean, I really respected him, because he really opened up the ability to get temperatures from measuring isotopes in ice cores, and so. Yeah, we had our misunderstanding on Kelkaya, but I give him credit that after we did succeed in drilling that core and sending one set of samples to his lab, he was so excited that he became our best supporter for why we have to drill mountain glaciers. So, to me, that's the way science works. If you can demonstrate to them, and then, and the scientists need to be open so that they can embrace this new idea. And so, yeah, we had our moments, but in the end, we were friends.
That's
And I
nice.
think that's one of the beautiful things about science is that, right? Is that you can have someone who disagrees with you. They don't see it the way you see it, and the data changes their mind, right? And there's a lot of people on the outside who say, "Oh, science, they say this and then they say this." That's part of the process. That's part of the beauty of this process, is that we can get closer to reality, understanding facts by having these arguments, by proving each other wrong. And the data is the thing that is king, right? You can have opinions, but at some point the data wins. And that's one of the things that I love about, especially in the way we tell it, is a lot of science stories just gloss over that at the end it's the facts that win, right? And so that's one of the things I really like about being able to tell Lonnie's story and having these kind of cool kids and Lonnie is coming in with this new idea and showing them through the data that he was right.
And
Yeah,
I think this is very true. I mean, the number when we were just trying to get into the tropics, Wally Broker, very famous climate scientist, would take me out to lunch, and he says, "Lonnie, if you don't get back in the polar regions, you're gonna lose out here." And well, that was his opinion, but as soon as we were able to demonstrate what was possible, he became one of our biggest supporters. So that's a good thing about science.
So you overcame sort of those obstacles along the way, but I want to ask Alex and Danny, who weren't raised in as adverse conditions as you were, I sort of assume. One of the things that we see again and again is that Lonnie endured these adverse conditions throughout his career, but then you guys are suddenly sort of thrust in this. He at least got to sort of work up to it. But Alex and Danny, it seems like all of a sudden you're out there in the mountains in the cold, and plus we hear about these locals that are shooting at each other and the snipers. When you all were shooting on the ground, what sort of practical concerns as filmmakers did you need to grapple with?
Yeah, so when we got the email from Lonnie saying he was going to the glacier that started his career, our first challenge was, how do we pay for this? How do we get a crew together? How do we get a team?
All you need is $7,000. Didn't you watch the movie?
And it's basically exactly the story of the movie. We talked to people, and one of them said, "What are you going to do about elevation?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And then I learned that when you're at those elevations, your lungs can fill with fluid, your brain can expand. There's a lot of things that could kill you. So we ended up figuring out a way to do oxygen training, where we had this machine that was depriving us of oxygen while we slept in a tent, and then through a mask while we did emails. And then in addition, I would go hiking as much as I can. We took Diamox, which you're supposed to take to help with elevation, and we chewed the cocoa leaves that they provided and had the cocoa tea in Peru. And I was hiking for a month ahead of time. Our camera crew was doing oxygen deprivation while on exercise bikes. Like, we were doing everything we can to get an edge so that one of us didn't go down, because we only had a limited crew. So we didn't have anybody to step in and run the camera if the cameraman went down, or if I went down. Alex was there, but it was very risky, and we just kind of took every little thing people said to do and then did our own oxygen training on top of that, and we managed pretty well. I'd still say, coming from Chef's Table, where We stay in a hotel. We wake up at like 6 in the morning and drive to set in a van. There's food waiting for us. The chefs are recommending delicious things. This was more, you wake up in a tent and you hike for an hour before we shoot a frame of anything. And we're carrying our own gear. And on the days we went to the summit to film the ice core drilling, it was basically 3 hours walking in a straight line to get to the top of the glacier. So it was just white and a blue sky, and you're walking at that for 3 hours, and then we start filming. And the first day we were up there, there was a lightning storm as soon as we got up there. And we had to debate whether we were going to stay or go. We ended up burying the camera in a snow pit, covering it with a tarp, and walking down with nothing metal. And what Lonnie told us to do was walk around far enough apart, because if you're too close and lightning hits one person, it jumps through all the people. So there were a lot of things that were very different from sitting in a post-production facility editing documentaries that were learning experiences for me.
But I think one thing to note is being on this expedition with Lonnie and I mean, they have so much knowledge about how to get large numbers of people up to altitude and keep them safe. And I think, Lonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but between 900 and 1,000 people have gone with you above 18,000 feet over the last 45 years or something like this. Lonnie has spent 4 years of his life above 18,000 feet, which I think is, I haven't heard of anyone else who has spent longer up there. So just kind of fitting into his protocol, right? You start in Cusco, you hang out, you climb a little bit, you come back down, you sleep. The next day you go a little higher, you come back down and sleep. They have figured out how to do this and how to do this safely. And I mean, that makes all the difference. It's just clicking into their specialty and knowledge base.
Lonnie, twice in the film, and I mean, it's something that we're all thinking as we watch it, is that, after that peak of awareness in the 90s, I think that, the Americans have slid backwards in its understanding of probably all science, but specifically to our concerns today, what it needs to do to handle the climate crisis. One of the things that I think has sort of come about, I suspect, since after the film was wrapped, or at least was released, is stuff like Ohio Senate Bill 83, which you know what it is, but I'll explain for everyone else. That's one of the bills that we're seeing in states where there is a conservative majority that would curtail how teachers and public institutions talk about certain things. And in the case of Ohio's Senate bill, it specifically addresses how professors can talk about the climate crisis. So Lonnie, I mean, you're an Ohio State guy. How are people like you and your colleagues grappling with this bill, and what would it change in the classroom if it passes?
Well, I think that first of all, yeah, there's still a lot of people with the wrong opinion on climate change, and unfortunately, they're in Congress and in the Senate, and these bills come up. But what happens in this process is they get rewritten, and that's no longer in that bill. And the other thing that was really disturbing to us was that you couldn't have any academic contacts in China, and we've been working in Tibet since 1984, and that's also been taken out of the bill. So by the time it comes up for voting, it will be quite a different bill. But the whole idea and the thing that we see in so many states is this issue that you can't talk about climate change in your classroom. And I come from West Virginia, and we were down lecturing at the Clay Center in Charleston, and the teachers brought their classes there to learn about climate change because they were not allowed to teach it in their classes. So this is, to me is, this is where, we're not doing the right thing for our young people. They're the ones who are going to be most impacted, and they need to realize how big and how large and how real the climate crisis is. And so the ways that we can communicate that, I mean, I think this is so important. And yeah, we're a nation of many opinions on many things, but this is why I study glaciers. Glaciers have no political agenda. They cannot be lobbied. No investment group can change the way they're reacting. And they just sum up their temperature, their precipitation, the humidity, the cloudiness, and they respond. And unfortunately, in today's world, they're shouting in a very large voice everywhere on this planet. We have a real problem here. And so they're kind of my truth serum. And truth protects us. Truth keeps us from making costly errors or even the loss of life. But we have to listen to the truth. And I think with, education and now AI, it's going to be harder and harder to tell where the truth is. But the glaciers will always tell the truth. And they will speak in a loud voice, but we do have to listen.
One of the questions that an audience member asked prior to this event was if you had found micro or nanoplastics in any of your glacier samples as you were doing your research. Is that the sort of thing that you're looking for, that you've seen?
It's not something that we're looking for, but there are groups. There's a group in the Netherlands who has studied nanoplastics in Greenland and in Antarctica. And nanoplastics are 4 times higher in concentration in Greenland than in Antarctica, which would make sense. But we also know from the ice cores that they've been there for 50 years. So the human impact has just grown through time. And these nanoplastics have been found on the summit of Everest. So they're global. And this is just one of a whole canopy of chemicals that humans have put into the atmosphere that are impacting our environment. And from a glacier standpoint, these plastics can accelerate the melting of the glacier and, of course, the rise in sea level, which is the biggest threat we have to local coastal communities. I mean, over 50% of our largest cities on this planet are coastal, and they're at risk from sea level rise. And all these glaciers are retreating, and that water makes its way into the rivers and into the ocean. And so these are huge forces that are at work. And so there's certain people, certain groups that study certain things, and we have our basic studies of climate, but we've also just recently added, we're looking at microbes, bacteria and viruses. Ice preserves anything that's in the air, gets frozen in time, and there's a timeline. So you can start looking at evolution through time and how these things change. How do they change under a warmer climate? We have no idea, but we know viruses is very important for all of us. And so understanding these basic processes, and of course, as a glaciologist or paleoclimatologist, I can't do that alone. I worked with the microbiology department and experts in that area. And together, we put together the story of climate and how these microbes evolve. But there are other things like black carbon that tell us the fire history. For example, a very basic question. What's the fire history of the Amazon? Well, we have ice cores going back 30,000 years, and we can measure that, and we can see how the 21st century compares to that long history of natural variations in the system. And that's probably one of the most important things ice cores give us is a perspective by which we can judge where we are now. And of course, one of the things that come out of the ice cores that is our only real record of the concentration of gases in our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, all these things we're concerned about today have been trapped for 800,000 years in these ice columns. And we can look at what the natural variability is and where we are in today's world. And that's where the real concern comes, because the natural variability, we've never been above 300 parts per million by volume. And today we're at 422 parts per million by volume. And we're not just rising, we are accelerating.
Yeah.
And this is a real challenge, as we have to get a handle on this, because the climate will continue to warm, glaciers will continue to melt until and again, our program is global, because I absolutely, no one nation can do this. You've got to work together. And so this is one of the things that when you work in different countries, politics and all these, we try to keep the science above that, but sometimes it becomes very difficult. But if you have good colleagues that you've worked with for decades, they will stick with you. And because we have to change things, not only in our country, but in those countries.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have to act to bring about any progress on this particular issue.
One of the things, I mean, of course, you're a very compelling speaker, but one of the things that, for me, the visual in the film that really brought it home is when we see you walking in the areas where the glaciers have melted. And I say that's one of like sort of the most striking things, but really, I mean, Alex and Danny, like almost every visual in this film is so striking, and you're in a different position than a lot of documentarians who I think sometimes have to struggle to find cool things to put on the screen to go with the words. How did you, I mean, I know that like Devin, your cinematographer isn't here with us, but can you sort of speak to how you made decisions on when to keep things sort of small and quiet, and when you went for the gusto with the stirring score and the drone footage and the look at everything?
Yeah, I mean, really it comes down to the same thing I was saying earlier. Like I have one target, which is always like, what do you need to tell the story, and what do you need to tell it well? And if we were hitting you with giant glacier shots for the whole film, you'd be tired of it right away. So just like when you're telling a story, you want to withhold how it turns out over time. So you're like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then you say what happens and it feels good. Same thing happens for visuals, is like, where in the film does seeing this make the biggest impact is kind of the question you have to ask about everything. And you'll be watching a cut, and sometimes you'll see a shot that's towards the end of the film and be like, why isn't this in the scene that comes earlier? So as you go through the process, you start out with everything in the wrong place. This goes for words, pictures, music, and you just get these kind of gut checks where you're like, oh, I wish I knew what was just said earlier. I wish I could see what Lonnie was talking about when he's talking about Quilcaya melting. And those decisions kind of shuffle it to where, like you said, everything finds a place where it makes the biggest impact. And I think a lot of that is just almost listening when you watch. Like you're the first audience member and you're trying to say like, well, is this working for me? How can it work better? And I think a lot of filmmakers get impressed with themselves, and they really like what they did. And just my process is more, I'm impressed when I see I'm making a constant predictable reaction in an audience member. So like if whatever we did gets people to cry in this scene every time, that's when I know like I've done something hard. I'm not too impressed with we climbed a mountain, we got these great shots. It's really when the thing we intend actually comes across in a like visceral, emotional way. That's always the target.
Well, and it's interesting that you sort of say that, because it's sort of the end of, you know, sitting there with you for all that time and thinking about the huge emotional issue of like, oh my God, how do we fix this, guys? Then we have the photo of Evan A. Wright, whose family donated his heart and allowed Lonnie to continue his life and work. And for some reason, at least for me, like that hit me so hard. And so I guess first, Lonnie, I want to ask, like, how are you doing?
Uh,
How
I'm
are you
doing,
feeling?
I'm doing well.
Okay.
The heart is great.
Yes.
And I was just in touch with the father by email 2 nights ago because he keeps track of me.
Oh,
And so it's a very emotional, personal thing, but they're a great family, and we're going to be going out to visit their new house here in the near future.
oh, that's so beautiful. I can really stand it, you guys. I mean, that's lovely, and I'm so glad that you're doing well, because I feel more comfortable than asking sort of this next question, which is like obviously there's this amazing parallel here that Lonnie's in denial for so long about the change that he needed to make and with his health, and how that nearly cost him everything, and how beautifully that sort of reflects our unwillingness to take the steps necessary to sort of, you know, avert a climate catastrophe. So I guess first I want to ask Alex and Danny, like, at what point in your filmmaking did you realize that you sort of wanted to set up that parallel?
That was one of the things that when we first met Lonnie, he talked about. And you know, I think the fact that he can be so open and honest talking about the denial, and same with Regina and Ellen, um, it's important because it shows you how susceptible we all are to denial. I mean, I say this a lot about Lonnie, but you know, the world expert saying, listen to the facts on climate change, was presented with facts that didn't fit with what he wanted out of his life. And it was just so easy to deny it. And I think that it has caused, immediately hearing Lonnie talk about that caused me to look at my own life. And I've seen my own blind spots of denial, and I probably don't see all of them. But I think it's a really important self-reflection. And we talk about this dichotomy in climate of people who believe and people who don't believe. There's a whole gray area of people who believe but behave worse than anyone who doesn't believe, right? That we have these shades of denial that we're all in. And some of that is based in reality. Some of it is just based on the fact you don't want to face an issue. And to me, one of the most humanizing things about this film is that Lonnie can talk about this openly, right? And the thing is because he faced the issue and dealt with it, he was able to do things more incredible than ever. And I think that is the thing we need to take away from this, is that we need to face the issue. We need to understand what our blind spots are. We need to face it with all the sobriety and just care. And then we can come out on the other side better. It's not just about preventing disaster. That's part of it. It's about getting to a place where we can all do amazing things together and have a better environment. And so I think when we first met Lonnie and he talked about this and he talked about his denial and he talked about, you know, the fact that it's just facts are facts are facts. And you can't turn away from things that are just true. So we that was immediately the kind of the hook and the reason we knew that we had to tell the story.
I would also say, like, the denial is a big part of that, but it's one half of a bigger thing in the film, which is this idea of belief. You know, when you go make a climate movie and you're expecting, here are the facts. Here's why you can't deny it. We're making this argument. And we didn't want to do that. There's enough films that lay out the case for this is how you understand. We wanted to tell this story and see what it taught us, because we noticed all these kind of potent parts of the story. And what ended up being the thing is a film that's about belief. Like, there's the section in the film where Lonnie's trying to drill Quilcaya. He failed with the helicopter, and the idea of drilling with solar panels comes up. And when asked, do you think we could do that? Bruce Cosi said, we can if we think we can. And there's this whole aspect of the climate debate that we're missing, which is this idea that it's unknown and it's scary to change all these things about our life. But if you believe it can be done and you believe the world's going to be better, like that's the first step to doing it, making the world be better. And if you believe in that and you bravely pursue it, you're going to get, like Lonnie did, people who showed up and brought their talents to the fold. And then soon, this thing that was impossible and insurmountable becomes something not only that Lonnie did once, but he could repeat all over the globe in different, harder environments. And he got better at it and better at it and better at it. And if you look at any solution from, renewable energy to efficiencies in our grid, all those kind of things that will solve this problem, they all seem hard now. If we start now, 10 years from now, they will be commonplace. They will be things that the people who pioneered those things will do them very well. And then there'll be people copying them eventually. And soon these things that we don't have the resources, don't have the people, don't have the talent to do, will be things that are just in the fabric of our society because we chose to believe they could be done. And there's no way to stand at the starting line and map out all the way that's going to happen. You just got to believe that you're going to make it to the end of the race and start running.
It's obviously, especially because Alex said it when we started this conversation, your primary hope is that audience take away from this, that even though the climate is in crisis, it's not irreversible. There are still things that we can do if we start to act. But my friends at Kanopy also wanted me to ask you sort of a more granular question, all three of you. And it's, what do you hope that audience members who are considering a career in film, in politics, in environmental science, specifically take away from this film?
I mean, I would start to say, to me, it's broader than any of those specific lanes. I think what Lonnie's story shows is the power of dreaming big. He grew up in a place where his teachers literally told him not to dream big because it's not going to work out. And his mom told him, don't let anyone limit your dreams. People told him, your idea is stupid and it's never going to work. And he kept at it anyway because he believed in it. And time after again in Lonnie's story, you see this chorus of voices who want to make life smaller, want to make ambitions smaller. And it's not necessarily out of that intention, but that's how we receive them as people who have dreams. Every doubt is like a dagger in the heart of our dreams. And I think what Lonnie's story does is it teaches you how to dream big. And what we've found is that there are people who watch this movie that have made big changes in their life after watching it. There was a projectionist at a movie theater that Alex met who has now moved on to train as an EMT, and he wants to save lives. There's a friend of mine from high school who saw the film, and he's a programmer and thought, if I were like Lonnie saving ice cores, what would my ice core be? And he had this idea of using AI to save dying languages, and he applied for a grant and got it to preserve the Navajo language. So my hope is that people are inspired to dream and know that those voices that say your dream doesn't make sense are there to sharpen the dream and to really make you think about what you want, but not to stop you. Like, we are the ones who stop ourselves when we dream.
What about you, Alex?
I mean, I want to yes end that, because Lonnie, being around Lonnie, has shown me that my dreams are possible, and I know that everyone around him comes away feeling the same thing. It's not just, we are so inundated with people who just say, you can do it, believe in yourself. It's different when you get to know somebody, get to see the story of someone who just faces seemingly impossible things and does it with a humbleness, an ability to learn. It's kind of the authority through action. Just by knowing that Lonnie's story exists and what he went through to make it possible changes the way that I see things are possible, changes the way that I see failure along that step, and I'm grateful to have gotten to know Lonnie and to see my life differently because of that. And I know that everyone who sees the film will come away with some aspect of that. Lonnie's persistence and just dreaming big and figuring it out is a thing that people will take away from it. And you'll find that if you want to be a filmmaker, you want to be an academic, whatever you want to do, the important thing that starts with is understanding what it is and why you want to do what you want to do, having a purpose. And you may not know your purpose, but discovering your purpose. And once you discover it, do not let go. And that's when the Lonnie engine kicks in, and you realize that I'm just going to do this because it is me. And I have one shot to do me, and I'm going to do it right. And and that applies to climate change, that applies to every job, that applies to life, at every single thing we do. And I think that, to me, if audiences can take that away, the way that I've seen audiences take it away, then we are changing things for the better.
What about you, Lonnie? What do you, besides obviously, the important message of climate change, what other sort of thing would you like somebody to take away from this film?
Well, I think first of all, I would say that over 10 years ago, my daughter, Regina, told me, Dad, one more high score, you're not going to change the trajectory we're on. And you got to reach millions of people to make a difference. And having published Science, Nature my whole career, I know there's a limited audience. You will not change the future just by doing the science. And so when this opportunity with Danny and Alex came up, that to produce a film, to tell the story, I thought, okay, this isn't perhaps a great opportunity to actually reach people that as a scientist I would never reach. And I think that also shows the importance of connecting the science. Science has to be solid, but with arts, filmmaking, to reach a bigger audience, to make a difference. And I don't think I could have found a better couple, Alex and Danny, to tell this story. And so I think they did a fantastic job, and I appreciate all the effort but you have to realize this is an effort of trying to make a difference. If you have children, you got to make a difference, because what they face is just, I mean, I see it every day, and I see it in the glaciers, and we have to change, and we will change. And it's just like the Nile and the heart transplant. There comes a time when the facts are in your face and you have no choice. But the good part of that is that you can make a choice. Yes, it's risky. You do take risk, but you have to make a change. But if you take those, you can actually come out the other side better than you were when you went in. And this is my hope with climate change, is that exactly the same type of thing will happen. Yes, it looks impossible, but it's not. We caused it, we can fix it. And when we do, we'll have a much better planet for ourselves and for our children.
Well, I now have some questions from our audience that I'm going to pass on. The first question is for Alex and Danny. An audience member asks what your shooting ratio was, film shot to what was included.
Oh, geez. I mean,
We
interview
filmed with Lonnie
alone-
for 39 days, I think, over the course of a year. I mean, it was not all day, every day, but
Oh.
it was a good over a month of filming.
Yeah, interview alone was over 20 hours of interviews with people. So just the shooting ratio of interview was,
10 to 1.
Yeah.
10 to 1 is a rough estimate, but yeah.
And
Well,
then we had all of Lonnie's archival footage too from
Yeah.
45 years of traveling across the globe that if we include that, we are talking a lot of material.
I mean,
And
yeah, thank God all those
probably-
guys came with cameras.
Yes.
Yeah, and we also had 10,000 plus photos. Basically, any photographer that joined Lonnie on an expedition, Alex made an effort to get access to the photos and scan them. So it really is the most amount of material I've had to make anything that I've made throughout my entire career. And luckily, I'm pretty ruthless about cutting stuff out of films.
And part of that digitizing process was not just to see what was available for the film, but to make sure these records are preserved for all time. So we made copies of everything and sent them back to the originators, and have Lonnie a backup of stuff we sent back to Lonnie, just to make sure that these are priceless views of the globe over time that really paint a picture of how our planet has changed over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And they need to exist in perpetuity.
Lonnie, an audience member asks if you ever acclimate to the cold and damp.
I would say probably when I was younger, it was easier. As I've gotten older, that sleeping on the ice is a little tough. But if you have the right equipment, down sleeping bags, mats, and coats, and you're prepared, you can endure that climate. And it's a strange thing. It seems really cold the first couple of weeks that you're there, but if you're there for 6 weeks, you don't notice it as much.
Yeah, Lonnie, that's called hypothermia.
I've had it just about anything you can get from working in a cold, high elevation environment. But hypothermia, pulmonary edema, all these things, it's part of the risk of working at high elevations. And so we have really worked hard to reduce those risks over the years. And we have an amazing field medical kit for ensuring, I mean, we can do everything from filling teeth to if you have a broken leg, we can give you morphine. We have a hyperbaric chamber where if worse comes to worse, we can actually pressurize someone and bring them down 10,000 feet without moving them. So we have adapted to that environment and found out how we can actually work and work well in those extreme conditions. And I was very pleased with the way Alex and Danny took to the field on Kelkaya. They did a great job. So their training really paid off.
Oh, guys, did you hear that? That's nice. And equipment has certainly improved a great deal. Looking at your tents in the 70s, I was like, oh man, compared to like what we have now, there's certainly been some strides in tents and coats in the last 50 years.
Absolutely. And I would say that for a person, I've run 65 expeditions in my lifetime, and no other time in human history would that have been possible. We wouldn't have had the solar power, we wouldn't have had the Kevlar cable and all the things that make what we do possible. So it's bringing it all together has been the challenge, but also very rewarding over time.
I have just been presented by Josh with what I believe will be our last question. I am reading it now for the first time. Forgive me if I stumble. For those of us in education who would like to share this film with our students in our classroom, how do we go about doing that? This is such an impactful film and story, and I'm literally sitting here today at Colorado State University with a student leader in my office who agrees. We want to share this with our students in natural resources.
So a pretty straightforward answer would be reach out to our distributor, canary.oscilloscope. Is it com or net?
Net. I can.
So our distributor is Oscilloscope. So if you search the name of the movie and the word oscilloscope, you'll probably find it. But Alex, add it.
I'll put it in the chat. Yeah.
But yeah, I would just say we want to find a way to share this film with as many classrooms as possible. I was particularly a bit of a pain in the butt in school, and anything I can do to help teachers make their job easier and more engaging, I'd love the film to play a part in that, to kind of make up for my past ways.
Yeah, that'll do it. Have you gotten reactions from teachers who have shared it with their classes already?
Yeah, my high school did a presentation, and we did some question and answer and had them fill out bits. We've done screenings at a lot of universities. I brought it back to MIT to show it there, and had a packed audience and standing ovation for a science film. You talk about leaving science to do this. When I did my PhD thesis, there were 30 to 40 people in the audience. When I showed Canary, there was 400 people. So it was shows you that this type of science filmmaking can reach further. And we've been universities all over have been holding screenings. Classrooms have been showing it. It is people who see it. They take away things from it that I don't think they were ready for, and that's a good thing. And it's just our mission to get it in front of as many people as possible. So yeah, it's been fun.
And
I would say from my perspective, getting emails from high school students in Southern California, Oregon, about how they were impacted by the film is the most rewarding. And because one of the main goals was to inspire the next generation of young people that you can make a difference. Everybody can make a difference. Yeah. And so that's very important.
And I've had 8-year-olds who have seen the movie. We didn't make this movie for kids, but kids gravitate towards it. I mean, they start seeing layers, right? And they start to understand what that means. And I've had so many kids who have seen the movie, knowing that I know Lonnie, have said, can you tell Lonnie this? Or I saw this and I thought of Lonnie. So it is one of those things that people from all walks of life can see themselves reflected in this story and take away something that is personal to them. In a way that I think is transcends a lot of ages and educational groups.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And we got, I think, to just a few more people today with this conversation. So thank you three so much for participating, for answering all my questions and our audience questions. We really do appreciate it. And I think everybody knows that they can watch this film on Kanopy. And as somebody in the chat mentioned, people who don't have access to it through their academic channels, if you have a library card, many libraries have deals with Kanopy, so there are ways to watch it at home as well. And Josh, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, I believe that's everything. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all so much for attending today. Thank you again to our filmmakers, Alex and Danny, and of course to Lonnie for agreeing to be part of this amazing film and for changing so many lives and for the incredible work you've done. I wish you all the best. Thank you again.
Thank you for having.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That was
care.
wonderful.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.